Why do the nations rage, and the peoples plot in vain? The kings of the earth set themselves, and the rulers take counsel together, against the Lord and against his anointed. As we know, there is nothing new under the sun. Therefore, as was then, so is today. Can we not see these things transpiring before our eyes? The kings, rulers of this earth operating in absolute defiance to nature, all the while professing to be acting for the benefit of it, and to save it from us, the peasantry, the proletariat, as they transgress the Creator in bold face and transform his creation in real time with artificial materials, synthetic concoctions and witches' brew, alchemy and pharmakia, Enochian magic and scry mirror conjuring, technology as a weapon in the guise of convenience, security, and necessity for the perfection of mankind, as if the Creator somewhere made a mistake. Now therefore, O kings, be wise, be warned, O rulers of the earth. Serve the Lord with fear, and rejoice with trembling. Kiss the Son, lest he be angry and you perish in the way, for his wrath is quickly kindled. Blessed are all who take refuge in him. While the secular, the humanistic, atheist, and agnostic take refuge in the world, the knowledge of fallen man and many sciences, with their fluctuating facts, malleable truths, conflicting analysis, and wicked, demon-eyed button pushers and scribes, they are betrayed and swindled into slavery. While the believer awaits redemption and an eternal kingdom, the non-believer awaits only death, a painful exit to the fire. Yet until then, they partake in an abusive and taxing experience as bondsmen to the kings and rulers of the earth. There is no freedom and liberation, only slavery to those desires deemed as liberating. There is no democracy. There no longer will be an individual. The anti-individual and statist organization of the collective, progressive, and sustainable utopia will bring equal slavery in the guise of world peace, freedom from crime in the guise of global police henchmen. The anti-individual state, therefore, can criminalize anything: speech, citizen autonomy, choice, and thoughts. Self-protection and assembly will be prohibited due to a perceived threat to the common good of the collective group. Individuals, in fact, will be criminals by default, unless they are part of a state-approved group with a state-approved worldview, registration, belief system, and deed of action. Self-sustenance will also be prohibited. Food and all need will be supplied by the state only, and any action taken otherwise will be considered a crime and threat to the security of the collective and hive mind, the gentry, the world market, and global citizenry. In order for this to meet fruition, mass psychological, geographical, political, economic, and cultural operations and restructure must take place. Education must be plagued by historical revisionism, the humanities and arts, anything to bury the need of logic, reason, and the classical forms of learning. We see all of these things taking place currently through Common Core education programming systems, academic track systems, standardized testing requirements, school closing and consolidation projects, and nationwide strict curriculum reform. In economics, we see the end of paper currency and the rise of cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin, and also automated shipping systems, which will centralize the economy to fit a global standard. And this mass reform requires the destruction of the nation state, so we will see influx of multiculturalism and forced diversity. We see this happening in places like Europe and, of course, the United States, which are the testing grounds and incubators of the global citizen culture and culture creation. Geographically, we see the environment being used for mass restructure via the United Nations and Agenda 21 and 2030, along with the World Environment Organization, the World Trade Organization, and of course UNESCO, with the help of international courts to solidify things by law via coercion of legislation. Culturally, we see this all unfolding very easily. Through the film industry and Hollywood, we notice the ideals and worldviews that match the goals of this sustainable society. We see the so-called progressive perspectives plastered throughout the mass media publications and television shows and series. Especially the network news media, we see a relentless campaign to inculcate the masses with neoliberal propaganda, left and right, conservative and liberal. Though they appear to oppose one another, they both push the same agendas, just from slightly different angles, yet they have the same goal: collectivism within a centralized international government and statist world council. Across the board, all major companies are commissioned to run the set program of required themes, events, contingent perspectives, and buzzwords. A blanket theme technique that psychology would describe as a form of repetition conditioning. This coordinated media onslaught of perspective management is extremely effective and literally contorts and mobilizes millions of people in short periods of time. And this is exactly why the CIA implemented the Operation Mockingbird in the 1970s. To render the mass media industry into a programming system based on forming public perspective, cultural norms, and ensuring proper execution of the new direction set forth for society and the world as a whole. With this, we will find occurring within society a general value for the state over God, a substitution where the state replaces God. Sustenance will be dependent on the state instead of the family or community. Child rearing will be fulfilled by the state, entertainment, technology, the pleasure industries, and social media, instead of the parents and extended family. Furthermore, we will notice an incremental surrender of personal liberties across all populations, which we see happening currently through force via mass psychological operations, hoaxes and false flags, scandals and tragedies, geoengineering, and not-so-natural disasters. Is it not fascinating that the ruling state and elite oligarchs that run this mass program, and with a straight face, sell it to us with the rhetoric of utopianism, equality, and progression, when in fact, and once one takes off the media blinders and fluffy feeling feathers, we can clearly see that it is all a massive ruse. See, human utopias are not only illogical and against the order of God, but they require total control to work properly. In other words, utopias are ultimately dystopias. This is why we see the breakdown of morality and the influx of depravity and so-called tolerance. But tolerance to what? In fact, it seems like the only growth of tolerance is in that of tolerating the profane and unnatural. Yet we see concurrently a growth in intolerance of staunch moral codes, biological law, social rules, and Christian worldview. History has brutally described how the loss of order and morality within a society always precedes its fall and destruction. Or as Aldous Huxley so precisely stated in his novel, The Brave New World, as economic and political freedom decrease in a society, compensating sexual freedoms and immoral vice increase. We are manipulatively convinced by the state that freedom is only displayed in limitless exploration of personal desire. Being able to do what you want, as you want, do what thou wilt, and so forth. As in the ways and words of Oscar Wilde, we see society today taking these large, limitless steps to depravity. And we all saw how Wilde's life ended. With this, we see the steady implementation of normalized pornography in society. Young and old, women and men, are initiated into the pleasure industries by way of instantaneous induction. We call it the internet. Prior to the internet, adult films were expensive and hard to come by. Thanks to the late 90s push for legal, limitless, and free internet adult entertainment, spearheaded by secular mass media think tanks and social steering committees, Bill Clinton, and of course by use of legislation, signed the Communication Decency Act of 1996 in the guise of protecting children from pornographic imagery, propelled and legalized an international internet porn market, solidifying the cultural home base of the pleasure industries. Next, Hollywood was called to the floor for its expertise in culture creation and public perception management skills. and it released the groundbreaking, or should we say moral code-breaking film, The People vs. Larry Flynt in 1996, conveniently during the signing of the Communication Decency Act, followed by the nail in the coffin porn industry glorification project and propaganda film Boogie Nights in 1997. From this point forward, pornography was legally and socially normalized into society. As well, society was being primed for the following moral decay projects of the 2010s, in which all moral taboos, sexual desires, identity disorders, and obsessions would be promoted and enculturated. This was not only done as an attack on the Christian morale and worldview, but further, an attack and follow-up brigade from the 70s attack on the family, the steady deconstruction of the God-ordained mother, father, and child, which would be a requirement to the deconstruction of the individual and the formation of the dependent yet liberated secular humanist collective global citizenry. This was, in addition, a move to build an innate dependence on pleasure, sexual stimuli, and kink within the populations, which would debase society into frothing humans acting as animals. Therefore, the state could produce vast and complex pleasure industries that would fulfill the desires of its dependent population, and further driving society into status-designed captivity, and further pushing away God from his people. A limitless desire and the exploration of undefined pleasures is indoctrinated into us as a true form of being free, when in fact, freedom, true freedom, is always a question of morality. As Augustine stated, a man has as many masters as he has vices, demonstrating that limitless desire results in vice, based on the inherent fallen nature of mankind and natural susceptibility to sin, that in turn will always become one's master. And this immediately refutes the idea of limitless desire as freedom. In fact, it is the opposite. Here we gather the satanic law of reversal, the inversion of God's creation as a game plan and mission of the state, the magnum opus. But yes, limitless desire is actually freedom, the freedom from morality. Yet it is also enslavement to those limitless desires. We understand that true freedom is the relinquishing of limitless desires and the clinging to of morality, faith, and spiritual knowledge of God that completes the soul with a spirit that frees one of need and propensity to the lusts of the flesh, eyes, and pride of life. Hence John 8:32. Then you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free. The fall of mankind is preordained, yet there is a method in which it is designed to happen. And we are seeing this design unfold before our eyes. Moreover, the depletion of objective moral law and proliferation of hedonism and the pathological pursuit of personal desire, by default, leads any population to ruin and destruction. Yet the current state of society today is oblivious to this history. Could it have something to do with the blanket-themed Mockingbird mass media programming of neoliberal worldviews that complement this progressive and dystopian tolerance? Could it also be the addition of a standardized, robotized, and streamlined education system plagued by historical revisionism and the denial of God? But let us not forget the multi-layers to further this cloud of deception, in which we find entertainment to cull the masses into submission via pleasure, insecurity, and identity dysphoria, followed by the drug use and addiction that it promotes, mental disorder and mood instability that it also promotes and induces, with the included fear programming of news media and identity weapons like social media. We find a whirlwind of confusion and mind control that would very easily blind any person from seeing that this direction society is taking is a dark, dreary, and dangerous one. Aside from God's chosen and reborn, redeemed, repented, renewed in mind and spirit, and walking therein, the rest of the world and its followers are simply food for the beast system, bricks in the wall of its smart cities, wide-eyed faces stuck in the screens of its AI technology, and hounding dogs circling its pleasure industries, all the while clueless and blind victims of its coming fall.